be discerning, and we've got to put each different cultural elements through what we call this litmus test of which of these categories it applies to. So first we're going to talk about receive. All right, when we're talking about this, we're saying that as Christians, as conservatives, this cultural element is fine. This cultural element is something that we can agree on. It's something that we can maybe not necessarily agree on, but it's something that we will accept into our home. It's something that we'll accept into our lives. We're perfectly okay with this. And interaction with that cultural element is healthy. A perfect example of this is sports. Okay? We can look at sports and we can say, okay, we might not agree with everything that individual players do, but we're also not going to just, reject Super Bowl Sunday in our church just because it's a secular sport. Does that make sense? So we can accept, we can receive things that aren't inherently Christian or aren't inherently conservative. But we can receive those and we can enjoy those. It doesn't matter whether you're a Christian or an atheist, whether you're conservative or a liberal. We can gather around these things, and in some ways, that's something that we can agree on. We can receive that cultural element. And as I mentioned, historically, we've seen that there are certain groups that have looked at cultural elements such as sports or such as other things and said that that's of the devil. It's not from the church, it's not of the church, and so we're not even going to partake in that. And going back to that macro view. But on a micro level, we can see, there might be aspects of it that we don't agree with, but we can, in generally speaking, we can receive, that cultural element into our lives.
And I'm here to come bring politics into it. All sports are great except soccer. It's social. No clap, right? Come on. So I got a quick funny story about that, all right? So in the early 1960s, they were looking at aerial photographs of Cuba. And a lot of people think that they found the missile silos and that's what's on the Cuban Missile Crisis. That's not accurate. The first thing that said that the Russians were on the island was actually that there were soccer fields on Cuba. And they were able to see these soccer fields from the satellite images. And they said, listen, Cubans play baseball. Russians play soccer. And so it was actually because of soccer that it spawned the Cuban Missile Crisis. So soccer is pretty much evil. I mean, come on. We beat Ghana and we're celebrating. I'm like, really? It's a small little country. We can't beat them by like 5? Yay us, I guess. Whatever. I like sports we dominate in. And if not, at least be interesting, like curling or luge. All right. But anyways, on that though, it's something that's redeemable, right? There's really no necessarily conservative or liberal principle in sports. I guess you could probably draw that out, but I'm not going to. But do you understand that it's something that the interaction with it is healthy? If you just let your kids interact with sports, they're not going to come away bleeding heart liberals who hate God, right? Unless they play soccer. In a youth league where they're not allowed to have trophies because everyone's the same. I'm going to get off that before I get in trouble. But most of the time, right, if I'm the coach, are we keeping score? Yes, we're keeping score. What's the point? This is my Saturday too, mowing the lawn. All right, so that's what we're talking about with receiving. And yes, there's a water analogy, like a pond you can go swimming in, it's fine. You might die, probably not. You probably are going to die if you drink that. So we're going to talk about rejection, and again, kind of in the same mode, we're going to talk about the micro. He's going to talk about the church aspect, I'll talk about the political aspect.
All right, so moving on to rejection. When we talk about rejecting a cultural element, what we're saying is that it is inherently toxic. It needs to be rejected. It is not something that we should be involved with. It's not even necessarily worthy of our input or of our interaction. Now coming from the coming from the church aspect, coming from the biblical aspect, and working to be a chaplain, one issue that I've seen that's been particularly relevant recently is the idea of marijuana use and recreational drugs. One thing that we've seen is the gate, if you will, to entrance on some of these issues has been the fact that it's been illegal. But as states are, several states have, such as Washington State and Colorado, have made these legal, it's really brought this question more into the church and more relevant. Now, from my view, from what I see in Scripture, from my personal convictions as a Christian, I would say whether marijuana use is legal in my state or not, that's not something I'm going to touch. I think that's something that overall I'm just going to reject. I'm going to put that to the side. And because the thing is, unfortunately, we've kind of begun this idea that just because something is legal, it's moral. And we all know here, sitting here, that legality does not equate morality. And so whether it's legal or not is not the issue. The issue is that from my personal, as we said, my personal litmus test, my personal filter, am I going to say that this is something, legal or not, is this something that I'm going to allow my children to engage in? Is this something that I'm personally going to engage in? And so, not particularly relevant here in Ohio, but we can see, just as an example, that's something that's being more in the public sphere as it's becoming legal. And the church is really having to deal with this, whereas in the past, it's just been, well, it's illegal, so we're just going to stay away. And so, and that's a perfect example of the reason that we need to do this. And we need to teach our kids how to judge cultural elements. Is this something we're going to partake in, or is this something we're not going to partake in, whether it's culturally sound, whether it's culturally accepted or not. And so I think that's a perfect example when it comes to rejecting a cultural element.
All right, I'm going to take a slightly different tack, not that I don't disagree with them, but I'm going to use another example for the political spectrum. And I don't recommend talking about what Jeremiah talked about if you're doing a fundraiser in Silicon Valley. They might bleed. But I'm going to talk about, in politics, we understand this from a standpoint of, it's pretty, popular, I guess, for people in DC to make fun of people who are quote-unquote one-issue voters, okay? Now, it's always used as a pejorative term. You're a one-issue voter. Now, I've long argued through my political science degrees and everything that everyone is at least a one-issue voter. We all have that one issue that is just the absolute no-go issue. I'm sorry. You don't agree with me on it, you're not getting my vote, you're not getting my help, you're not getting any of my time, talent, or treasure. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to waver on it. Now, for me, politically, that issue is abortion. Okay? Let's lay all the cards on the table. I am pro-life, with only two exceptions, the death penalty and war. But everything else I'm pro-life on. I thought I'd get a chuckle. Tough crowd. All right. Not the two exceptions, everyone else. Anyways, but I don't care what the stakes are. If you are pro-choice, you are pro-abortion, I'm not going to work for you. You're not getting a dime out of my money. I don't care if you have an R next to your name, a D next to your name, any kind of letter next to your name I'm allegedly supposed to care about. It doesn't matter. Right? That is the gateway. That's just the beginning of the conversation. If you can't make it past that gate, you're not getting anything. Now, that may not be your gate. You have a different gate. All right? If you had no gates, you probably wouldn't be here because you would be a moderate somewhere else. But we all have that. Okay? So that's the rejection filter. Now, we have to be able to explain that too. Right? I can't just tell my kids, hey, we're pro-life. And so I have to be able to explain that. Why are we pro-life? Why is this such an important issue to us?